Okay, today I have with me Shivani Mistry. Welcome, Shivani.
Hi everyone.
And Shivani's going to talk to us a little bit about her placement year. So can I ask you to just start off by telling us when you went on placement, where you went on placement, and what your role was, please?
Okay, so I went on placement year in 2014. My placement role was a IT project coordinator for a company called Computacenter. They are a IT service provider. They work with companies, well, in line with companies such as Gemini, Microsoft, etc. But they're just slightly more on a smaller scale. But in terms of what is actually delivered to the customer is all the IT related services, and that also includes all various different partners such as Lenovo, Microsoft, HP, where physical devices or physical items are actually provided through what we basically roll out to the customer and their requirements.
Great. And so that was a while ago. Are you working at Computacenter now, or have you moved to a different employer?
So I'm still at Computacenter. I don't plan to leave anytime soon, just because I feel like there's so much more for me to do within the company. There's a lot of opportunities. The company itself is, as any other company, is evolving as time goes by, and then in that way as well, various different departments have different opportunities coming up. So I'm actually still in the same department that I started as a graduate, and I will look to move into a different department should the opportunity arise. But with the variety that I do in my role itself, I'm quite happy where I am at the moment.
Excellent. And what part did it play, having had a placement year at Computacenter, in then becoming a graduate employee?
So there's two sides to this. I'll start with the easier one for me to explain, which is because I already did a placement year at Computacenter, it was already a sort of halfway tick in the box in terms of the criteria for the graduate scheme. So I don't mean by a tick in the box that you're guaranteed a job. It's just more that having done an IT project coordinator role, and then the project management graduate program is effectively you being on the program to develop to become into a project manager. I already had those kind of foundations of the type of person they were looking for. And to be honest, the placement, allowed me to gain a lot of experience, not just in the role itself, but I learned a lot about the company. So when I went over to over as a graduate, the biggest benefit was that I understood the company, the values, and to be honest, the experience didn't really matter. It did give me an advantage, but the graduate program, like many programs, it's more about you fitting into the role and into the company culture, because a lot of companies understand that as a graduate, if you do have experience, realistically, you don't have more than a year's worth of experience. And a lot of graduate programs, as well as the one at Computacenter, they do say that you can have experience in any field for you to be able to actually apply for the role. So the biggest advantage as being a graduate is that you actually have that opportunity to go out and explore in terms of the areas you might want to work in, and then you can see whether that's something you want to build your career in, or decide that you want to move into a different field or a different department, I guess.
So did you have to sort of apply in your final year for the graduate scheme, or did you get a job offer as you were leaving your placement year?
So I actually had to go through the full graduate assessment program. And the reason for this was that although it's a project management graduate program, my project coordinator role was in a different department. So before I was in more of the internal teams, like I guess the teams that typically the customer doesn't see, the people who are doing other work in the background. And then the graduate role was more about being customer facing, on customer side, on that hands-on delivery element of it. So whilst the foundations are still the same within project management, is, you know, two completely different environments that you're working in. So I literally had to go through exactly the same process. So there wasn't anything where I had a advantage. I still had to go through the certain requirements they had, such as the online test and the video interview. And it's only then really that they see, when you're invited to the assessment centre, you know, the back history of when I actually did placement. Yeah.
So you go through those hoops, you still go through the same hoops.
Yeah, still the same hoops. But I guess the comfort is that, and it's not just myself. I mean, I have friends who'd gone and worked away in one company and then went back to the graduate program. I think in the back of your mind, it's just a little bit reassuring that you're applying for a company that you've worked for before, and it actually does help a little bit with your confidence as well. Because, you know, it's I don't mean to make this sound scary, but at the end of the day, there are so many graduates and there are only limited number of roles that, you know, companies can offer. So it does make you feel like, okay, well, I have worked here before. Maybe they'll see, or, you know, there might be a connection there. But as
So it
you
might
said,
help you stand out, maybe.
yeah, it does help you stand up. But again, as you said, you do need to go through all of the steps. It might be different for other companies. Again, I do know friends who have gone to a company and have been offered a graduate role. But for companies that have like a set program, they do tend to make you go through the full process.
Mm. And then thinking back to when you were applying for the placement year, not the graduate role, how many placements did you apply for?
So from the top of my head, I think I applied for about 30 placement roles. So the reason why I applied for so many was because for me, I always wanted to do a placement year. So this is before, like, when I was applying for universities. So one of the key decisions for me when choosing a university was it was really important that the university allowed a placement year, or at least like a gap year. At that time, I didn't know if I'd actually do a, you know, a job, or if I'd do study abroad, but I just needed to know that I had that option. And then by like my first year, I sort of decided anyway that I did want to do a year out regardless. And I preferred to do work placement, just because I'd heard, you know, success stories that it's really good to, you know, build your profile or your CV ahead of actually graduating. Um, so yeah, I just looked everywhere really. You know, I guess you could ask me the question, how did I end up with IT placement year when I studied business economics? Now, with the placement year itself, they don't always look at, you know, what you're studying. It's more about you going out to the company for a year and experience what it's like. And for me, it just happened that I really enjoyed the role that I was doing in project management, and I wanted to go into it further. But I applied for all sorts of different companies. I applied for like analyst roles, coordinator roles, even admin roles as well. I think a lot of the time people sort of think, oh, an admin role will just be, you know, potentially doing photocopying, updating spreadsheets, etc. But a lot of companies probably generalize the admin role as for a placement year student, just because it's really hard to specify what your exact role will be,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is why a lot of companies just, when you're on placement, you're there as like a placement year student, or a placement
Broad, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. And when you were applying, I mean, 30 is fairly average, actually, isn't it? You know, in your experience, was that the same for your friends? And where did you, or if at all, get support and help in strengthening your applications?
So the bit where I got the most help in was that, because I knew I wanted to do a placement year, as you're aware, we've got the employability office within Hertfordshire. So what I did was I looked at various different applications and I looked at their criteria, and then I put my CV together as to what I think it should be. And then I actually made an appointment with somebody at the employability office to say, look, I'm really looking to do a placement year and I want to get ahead of the game. you know, what support can you provide me? And actually, I think I had 2 or 3 sessions where somebody helped me to tailor my CV. Just so that it wasn't some generic CV, it actually applied to the role itself. And it was the same for my friends or other people that I know that did a placement year as well. It was, some had applied to 30, some had applied to 40, some only applied to 10 and they got the placement year. So I think it does depend on the industry, how popular the applications are, and it also depends on how picky the company is. I think some companies might be more you know, flexible than others, whereas others might be very particular. I guess, for example, you know, the companies like the Big Four, very particular about what you're studying and what you're doing to be able to actually apply. But, you know, I think the other thing is that it's not always about going for the really big companies. And to be fair, the Computacenter role I actually found on the careers website within the you know, our employability area.
That's Handshake, it's called now. It used to be Career Hub. It's called Handshake.
Career Hub. Yes, that's it. Okay, you can tell I graduated a few years ago. But no, that's what I use. So I think it's really important that you do actually use what's being provided by the university. Because, you know, you don't always get that kind of support elsewhere. So where it's offered, you should definitely take it. And obviously it worked for me.
Yeah. And on that note, you know, about sort of advice and guidance, I wonder whether you've got any particular thoughts on, you know, guidance and experience for Black, Asian and minority ethnic students, because what we see in the business school is that fewer numbers of Black, Asian and minority ethnic students are going on placement for a school that has a majority of Black, Asian and minority ethnic students. So do you have any particular thoughts on or encouragement or guidance for our students?
So I think being an Asian female myself, so I didn't really have, I wouldn't call it a problem, but I didn't really have this in my household with my parents. But I think the general perception, especially for, you know, a female girl, is to go away and go to university and, you know, finish your degree. And I think a lot of the time when you talk about a gap year or replacement year, it's kind of like, well, why do you need to go out for a year when you can finish your degree? Why are you delaying it? So I think especially for students who might be in that kind of household environment, I think it's really important to educate your parents and educate your family. My parents didn't go to university themselves, but they were always very forward for me to go to university and really shape my career in terms of what I want to do. And they helped me as much as they could. And, you know, they didn't really know that much about the placement year, etc. They never said I couldn't do it, but it just meant that I, you know, educated them about it to say that, well, if I go away and do a placement year, you know, these are the benefits from it. I guess also saying that placement years are paid, as a majority are paid, I think that does add, you know, a huge bonus to it. So I think a lot of this is actually to do with like the mentality, I guess, and just, I think if you talk to your parents about it, maybe they'll, you know, understand and might swing towards it more. Or alternatively as well, I think people just feel like, yeah, I'm going to university, I'll study for 3 years and then I'll find a job after. And I think there's a huge difference in just finding a job after you finish university and actually doing, like, going into a job role where they're going to sort of help and support you and shape you into you know, becoming a future leader or a manager, or, you know, along those sort of lines. Because the whole reason why companies invest in graduates is so that they can retain them in the company and help them build and develop and, you know, have a successful career in that. So I think that's the key thing for me, really, is just the education part of it. And I think people just need to stop thinking that, yeah, I'll go and do 3 years, because a lot of my friends did that. Some actually got a job straight away, but they also actually did a summer internship, so they didn't do a placement year, but they did do something other than just their degree. And then if you're not doing a placement year, you need to effectively sell yourself to the company, but you need to show that you're more than just, studying. What else are you doing that's outside of going to university full time or part time over 5 years?
Excellent. Yeah, excellent tips, because a lot of companies do use placement years now as part of their talent pipeline, don't they? So that gives you all sorts of things to put on your CVs and your applications and talk about in interviews that you might not be able to do as well with different sorts of part-time jobs that you've had before.
Yeah.
So thinking about that, did you have any other sort of part-time jobs when you were a student or previously? And if so, how was it different in when you were on placement? What was the difference between the part-time jobs you'd had before and being on placement?
So I had a part-time job working at the checkouts when I was at college. And then when I came to university, I wanted to focus on my studying. So instead of going for a part-time job elsewhere, I contributed to the business school itself and the university. So I was a student ambassador. So helped out with open days.
Yes.
And I think there's the outreach program where I helped out as well, bringing students from schools in, showing them what it's like to, stay at university, consider higher education. I was also a student representative for my program for one of the years as well. That was in my second year, I believe. Can't really remember exactly. But it was those sort of things. So when I actually went to apply for my placement year, okay, I didn't have that, part-time job, but they could see that I was doing things other than just, I guess, going to the library and studying. And those aspects of it, like, for example, like working in a team, like working with different people, not just your colleagues. Like, yeah, you can, everyone always use that example. I can work in a team effectively, but that's when they're doing coursework. But what else outside doing coursework or a group presentation?
So when you were
Yeah.
on placement, what was that environment like in comparison to the checkout job and the student ambassador role? What did you notice was different about that professional
So
environment?
what was very different was that when you're at university, you're in your own university's own element. You know the university, the people you're working with, and the staff that you know as well. And the biggest difference is that you're in for me was I was in an office environment. I was, like engaging, talking, sitting with people who are of the same grade as me, but then I've also got, the very senior managers, head of departments, etc. So, before I went from working with people who I guess were within my area, and then I've had this huge jump of being in a corporate office in a corporate environment, and working with these different levels of people. And it is very daunting, to begin with anyway. And then you actually realize a lot of, these people are normal people at the end of the day. But, you don't actually know how you actually learn how to talk to these people, how you communicate, what to say, what not to say. And that's very different when you're, in like your part-time job as well. It's just the expectation increases a lot because they expect a certain standard for somebody who has gone to university as opposed to somebody that hasn't.
Yeah, so it really developed your interpersonal skills then, how you communicate with different levels of seniority. That
Yeah,
sounds like a good development.
and I think it's not just about who you communicate with. I think it's your level of self-confidence as well. So the biggest feedback that I received at the end of my placement year was that, the Shivani that walked through that door on the first day of the office is a completely different Shivani to who we're seeing now. I think my placement year as a whole really, really helped me to come out of my shell. And I think with me, because I care a lot about what I do, and this is still now as well. I think sometimes when you care a lot about what you do, you also worry that what if you haven't done it, if you've not done it right, that self-doubt and everything. And then, when you've gone and done it, you actually think, oh, wait, actually, I do know how to do this. I do know what I'm talking about. And it just builds your confidence. And I think that really, really helped me when it came to applying for graduate roles, because I sort of realized what I can do and what I can achieve. But I didn't know that, I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't have done my placement yet.
Excellent. That sounds really inspiring. So my final question then is, and I know it's a while ago, what did it do for you in terms of returning to final year? So you've been on placement. What impact did that have for you in your final year of study?
So for me, in my final year of study, I think it was just a change in my mindset. I mean, to be fair, in first year and second year, I was always somebody who was relatively like organized. I didn't like, doing assignments and revision last minute or anything, just because I know that doing things last minute and cramming, for example, isn't for me. But what happened in my placement year was I got that confidence that yes, I can do things. So I started believing in myself more. And also, it put me in a really good routine as well. So when I was in my final year, I felt like with work, I actually realized I work so much better during the morning and throughout the day rather than working in the evenings. So I kind of stuck to that schedule where I'd get to, the library at a certain time where I knew was my peak working time, like the time
Mm.
that I'd be the most efficient. And then, I'd go and, do my studying or my coursework or whatever I had to do, and then like sort of finish for the end of the day. And it just helped me to become more organized as well. And also, I felt like I was more confident in sort of going to, my like tutor, or is it, I think it was your year lead or somebody, just to
Program
ask,
leader. Mm.
program leader, that's it, just to ask for help or just a bit more guidance. Whereas I think in my first or second year, I might have been like, oh, I want help, but I'm not really going to
Mm.
ask for help. That
So you became
it's
more
just,
assertive.
yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
excellent. Well, thank you ever so much for sharing your story. I hope that chimes with lots of our current students. And I know Computacenter is literally down the road from the campus, and we do send quite a number of students there on placements and into graduate roles. So thank you ever so much for sharing your story with us today, Shivani.
No, thank you for having me.